We're going to talk about midpoint and how to find how to find the middle between two values. So first thing you need to know is that midpoint is the middle or the average of two coordinates. So if you have two endpoints, you just average the x values together, you average the y values together, and that gets you in the middle. Okay, it's halfway there. All right. Now the formula, again, it's just the average, so it's a coordinate, so you always have to put the parentheses and the comma in the middle, and it's x1 plus x2 divided by 2, because you have 2 points, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Now, if you have a centroid, now the centroid is the middle of a shape, so it's basically the midpoint of a shape in a way. So what you're doing is you find the average of all the corners of the shape, and that'll tell you what the centroid is. So you do x1 plus x2 plus x3 dot, 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 all the way up to xn, however many points there are, divided by n, the number of values, comma y1 plus y2, etc., all the way till the final y value, yn, divided by n, which is the number of corner points there are. So again, if you had a four-sided figure like this, the centroid would be like in the middle. The centroid is where you could balance the figure on. Like imagine like if you had a plate, the centroid would be in the very center of the plate. Basically, if you draw connected to the corners, the four areas that are formed are all equal. So in this case, we have midpoint. C is the midpoint of segment AB, and D is the midpoint of segment CD. All right, this is a mouthful. So what I would recommend doing first is just try to sketch the problem. Okay, so to try to visualize what the problem is, and make sure when you plot the points, always put the letter and the coordinate. Okay, so we plotted A first, then we plotted B. So then we'll connect that with a segment, and know that C is going to be the midpoint of that. So C is somewhere in the middle, and it says that D is the midpoint of segment C, or B is the midpoint of segment CD. So it goes C, then B, which is the middle, and then D will be somewhere down on the bottom right, because B is in the middle between C and D. All right, so that just helps us visualize kind of where we're going with this problem. All right, so let's go ahead and find the midpoint C first. Now, I recommend to, whenever you're doing distances or midpoints or anything, do the rise and run. This helps for so many different reasons. So if we're going from positive 5 down to negative 3, so 5 to 0 is 5, 0 to negative 3 is 3. So you get 8 down, and then from negative 2 to 5, that's 7 over. So our rise and run is 8 and 7. Now, know that the midpoint is in the middle between those two numbers. So what's half of 8? Again, half of 8 is going to be 4, so we're going to go down 4, and half of 7 is 3.5, so we're going to go over 3.5. So if I start up there at negative 5, well, if I go down 5, so I start at 5 and I go down 4, that'll take me down to positive 1. So I know that the y value of our midpoint is going to be positive 1. Then we go from negative 2 over 3.5. Again, that'll take us to positive 1.5. So our x value is 1.5. So that means our midpoint is going to be 1.5, which is our x, comma 1, which is our y. Okay. Now that's how I normally would find this. The other alternative, for those that aren't as comfortable visualizing it, you can do the midpoint formula. So if you label your two endpoints, x1, y1, x2, y2, you can just then average the x values, so you add them up and divide by 2, comma, and then add the y values. Add them up and divide by 2. In this case, this isn't that hard because it's just basic integers, so you get 3 over 2, which is 1.5, and then 2 over 2, which is 1. And as you can see, we'll get the same answer that we did by doing it more of in a visual fashion. All right, so now we have our midpoint. That's how we get C. Now here's an example of finding an endpoint if you're given, because here we're given C and B, and we're looking for the next value. All right, so I think again, if you did the previous step visually, you can do this step visually as well. So halfway there is going down 4 and over 3.5. So that's going halfway. So if you want to get all the way there, you just have to do that same motion again. So we're going to go down another 4 and over another 3.5. So if we're at 5, -3, that's B. So if I go down another 4, that's going to take me down to -7. If I go over another 3.5, that now will take me to positive 8.5. So we'll get 8.5, -7. Yeah, sorry, just catching up here. So we'll go over 3.5, and that gets us to 8.5. Now again, that I think is the easiest way to do these problems visually. But again, for those of you that like formulas, I'm going to now show you how you would do it with the formula. Now this case, it's a little bit trickier because, again, we're given an endpoint and the middle. So the easiest way to do this is kind of set this up as two equations. So our x1 plus x2 divided by 2 will give us our midpoint, or our x mid. Alright, so in this case, we know that our x1 and y1, and we know our midpoint value, which is b. We'll call that x midpoint, y midpoint, xm, ym. And we're looking for our x2, y2. So when you plug these numbers in, we're going to plug in the 1.5 in for x1, plus x2 we don't know, so we put x2 divided by 2, and our x midpoint is going to be positive 5. So now you can make a proportion, 5 over 1. Again, fraction equals a fraction, so you just cross multiply. You'll end up getting 1.5 plus x2 equals 10. Subtract 1.5, you'll get x2 equals 8.5, which again is the same thing we had the visual way. Now you'll have to set up another equation, see up at the top there. y1 plus y2 divided by 2 equals the y midpoint. You're going to plug in the values that we had before. So you're going to plug in the 1 for the y value and the -3 for the midpoint value. Cross multiply, and you'll get 1 plus y2 equals -6. And then the opposite of +1 is -1, so you'll get -6 and -1, which make -7. Which again, same x value, same y value we had before. Two different ways to do the same thing. Again, I recommend the visual method.